There's something horrifyingly true about the past. It doesn't die just because time passes. It clings to you. It speaks in silence. It haunts you not in words, but in your actions, your fears, your relationships, your dreams. And if you're not careful, if you don't confront it, it shapes your future with the very pain you've tried so hard to ignore. Most people don't process their trauma, they bury it. But whatever is buried alive comes back stronger, darker, and more distorted. So the question is not whether you have trauma. The question is, what will you do with it? Avoiding pain is instinctive, but avoiding trauma is fatal, because what you refuse to face becomes the tyrant ruling your subconscious. Healing starts not with pretending you're okay, but by acknowledging what broke you in the first place. It requires the courage to revisit what shattered your identity, not to relive it, but to reframe it. You must look directly into the abyss of your past, voluntarily, consciously, willfully, and in doing so you shrink its power, because the monster in the closet loses its terror when you open the door, turn on the light, and give it a name. Trauma lives in chaos. It scrambles memory, blurs meaning, and breeds confusion. The first thing trauma does is destroy your sense of order, your belief in fairness, in cause and effect, in stability. So your first task is to rebuild order, internally and externally. That means routines, truthful journaling, disciplined habits, and small achievable goals. It's not just about coping, it's about reclaiming the structure of your life. When you create structure, even in tiny forms, you begin to reclaim agency, and with agency, the darkness starts to lift. Most trauma exists in silence, unspeakable, shameful, and paralyzing, but what you cannot articulate, you cannot heal. Words are your salvation. You need to tell the story, not just to someone else, but to yourself. Not the version that hides or dramatizes, but the truth, because only truth sets you free. Find someone who will listen, not fix, not judge, just witness. And speak, and if no one is there, write it out. Say the terrible thing, say the embarrassing thing, say the thing you've avoided for years, because truth organizes the mind, and the mind, once ordered, becomes capable of healing. This is perhaps the hardest lesson. Your suffering, once processed, must become something. You can't stay a victim. You must move forward with purpose. Trauma, if confronted and integrated, becomes the soil in which deep wisdom, resilience, and compassion grow. Responsibility is the bridge between pain and power. When you take ownership of your healing, when you decide to stand up despite everything, you become someone others can lean on, and that transforms not just your life, but the lives around you. You stop the cycle, you become the antidote to the very suffering you endured. Avoiding trauma is a deeply human response. The mind, when confronted with overwhelming pain, often resorts to suppression, dissociation, or denial as a survival mechanism. And while this might protect you in the short term, in the long run, it creates a fractured psyche, a split within yourself. You carry on as if nothing happened, but beneath that surface lies a raw, unhealed wound that dictates your behaviors, emotions, and beliefs. Avoidance is not healing. It is postponement, and trauma that remains unprocessed doesn't fade, it festers. It leaks into your relationships, influences your choices, and quietly undermines your confidence, your joy, and your ability to feel safe in the world. So the first and perhaps most important step in processing past trauma is to voluntarily confront it, not when it explodes and forces you to, not when you're at your breaking point, but by your own choice with your eyes wide open. There is immense power in choosing to face what haunts you, because when you face something voluntarily, you are not a victim of it. You are an agent confronting it. The fear doesn't vanish, but your posture changes. You're no longer running, you're standing. You become the one who turns toward the dragon rather than away from it. And that matters, because the part of your soul that remains frozen in the past only begins to thaw when you walk back to where it froze. It is not about wallowing in the past or endlessly reliving it. It's about integrating it. It's about saying, yes, this happened, and I am no longer afraid to acknowledge it. That single act of truth, telling, even if done quietly and alone, breaks the spell that trauma holds over you. Most people believe that time heals all wounds, but that is dangerously misleading. Time alone does not heal, attention heals, honesty heals, courageous reflection heals, and those require intention. You must be willing to explore the memory, feel the emotions you've avoided, and allow yourself to grieve what was lost, whether it was your innocence, your safety, your trust, or your sense of control. The path to healing begins where the pain is. It's there, not away from it, that you'll find your strength, because pain, if walked through with awareness, becomes fuel. You don't conquer trauma by ignoring it. You conquer it by integrating it into your story, not as the end of you, but as the place where the true story of your resilience begins. Trauma has a way of plunging your internal world into disarray. One moment, your life may have felt predictable, structured, and even safe. Then suddenly, something happens, a betrayal, a loss, a terrifying event, and your mind can no longer trust the order it once relied upon. What once made sense is now fragmented. The emotional chaos that follows is not just a feeling, it becomes a world. You might find yourself constantly anxious, overly alert, or completely numb. You might struggle with decision making, forgetfulness, or even maintaining simple routines. This is the psychological footprint of trauma. It doesn't just live in memory, it lives in your sense of order. And when that order breaks, everything else starts to collapse with it. To begin healing, you have to recreate that lost order. Structure is not a prison, it is protection. When your life has been thrown into chaos, rebuilding structure is one of the most radical acts of self-care. It may seem trivial, even laughably small, to start by cleaning your room, creating a daily schedule, or keeping a journal. But these small acts matter far more than they appear. They are ways of saying, I am reclaiming authority over my environment and my mind. And when you begin to impose meaningful order on the external world, your internal world starts to reflect that effort. The chaos begins to recede. Trauma makes you feel powerless, and when you lack structure, that powerlessness is reinforced. You become reactive instead of proactive, disoriented instead of focused. But when you create systems, even very simple ones, you introduce predictability back into your life. You establish moments in the day when you are not ruled by your emotions, but by your intentions. It might be as simple as waking up at the same time each day, organizing your workspace, or dedicating 10 minutes to reflection. These practices ground you in the present and slowly disentangle you from the past. Even more important is the internal structure you build through reflection and disciplined thought. Trauma can blur the line between past and present, making old pain feel as if it's happening now. But when you impose cognitive structure, through writing, therapy, or meditation, you create clarity. You distinguish between what was and what is. That clarity is crucial, because when you understand where you are and why you feel the way you do, you become capable of making real changes. Structure doesn't just help you manage trauma, it gives you the psychological scaffolding to transform it. Trauma often hides in silence. It buries itself in the words we never said, the stories we never told, and the emotions we've locked away for years. One of the most devastating consequences of trauma is its ability to rob us of language. When something deeply painful occurs, especially during moments of vulnerability or powerlessness, we often don't have the words to express it, or we're too afraid or ashamed to try. Over time, that silence becomes a prison. We don't just lose the ability to communicate what happened, we start to lose the ability to understand it ourselves. That's why reclaiming your voice through speaking or writing is not just helpful, it is absolutely essential to healing. Language gives form to chaos. When you speak your trauma, when you put it into words, you are organizing it, you are drawing lines around it, you are saying, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel, and this is what it cost me. Until you do that, the traumatic memory remains amorphous. It shifts shape, attacks you when you least expect it, and infects your thoughts and behaviors in unpredictable ways. But when you take the experience and express it clearly, it becomes defined, and what is defined can be understood. And what is understood can be healed, but this process requires immense courage. It is terrifying to speak the unspeakable. It feels like reopening a wound you've worked so hard to ignore, but silence does not protect you. It isolates you. It strengthens the trauma by hiding it from the light of truth. Whether it's through therapy, confession to a trusted friend, or journaling in a private notebook, you must find a way to tell the story. It doesn't need to be perfect, it doesn't need to be elegant, it just needs to be real. Authenticity is far more healing than eloquence. The truth, even when painful, is a foundation. Lies and silence erode the ground beneath you. But the truth grounds you, it connects you to reality, it allows you to say, "This happened, but it is not all of me." Over time, as you speak your truth again and again, something profound happens. You change your relationship with the trauma. You're no longer the one being chased by it. You become the one naming it, framing it, and placing it where it belongs. In the past, this shift marks the beginning of freedom, because the voice you lost in your pain is the very voice that will lead you out of it. Suffering, when left unattended, mutates into a corrosive agent that quietly seeps into every domain of life, but when taken up as a responsibility, it becomes raw material for metamorphosis. Responsibility is more than a moral slogan, it is a psychological pivot. By accepting that you are answerable for how you respond to what happened, you re-enter the domain of choice. You can no longer claim helplessness or outsource your healing to circumstance. This is not a denial of injustice or an absolution of perpetrators. It is the sober recognition that no one can walk the path of recovery on your behalf. The very act of saying, "I will carry this consciously," turns the passive weight of injury into an active burden that can be shaped. Like iron placed in a forge, trauma under deliberate responsibility heats, bends, and eventually hardens into a strength inconceivable to the untouched. That transformation begins with small but deliberate commitments. Perhaps you vow to attend therapy weekly, to journal nightly, to exercise regularly, or to mentor someone fighting similar demons. Each commitment is a contractual reminder that your pain will no longer dictate your behavior without your consent. These contracts are not arbitrary. They align suffering with purposeful action. When you translate agony into initiative, grief into compassion, fear into vigilance, you alchemize what once diminished you into an expanding reservoir of power. The burden does not get lighter, you get stronger. Just as muscles grow only when subjected to resistance, character grows only when subjected to meaningful hardship taken up willingly. Responsibility also reframes identity. Trauma often leaves you self-defined by what was done to you, a victim, a casualty, a broken thing. Responsibility interrupts that narrative by inserting agency. I am the one who is responding. Over time, this agency evolves into mastery. You notice that friends seek your counsel because your scars carry wisdom. You find yourself the steady one in crisis because you have rehearsed fortitude in the privacy of your own battle. Suffering, once silent and solitary, becomes a communal asset, a source of empathy and leadership. In taking responsibility, you do not merely recover, you contribute. Finally, responsibility ends the generational echo of unprocessed trauma. Children, partners, colleagues, every life that intersects yours benefits when you convert pain into disciplined virtue. By standing upright in the aftermath of devastation, you model the possibility of redemption. You demonstrate that history need not be destiny, that wounds can become wellsprings, and that chaos can be ordered into meaning. This is how suffering culminates in strength, not through denial, nor through perpetual grievance, but through the relentless, voluntary labor of turning what harmed you into what equips you to help others. In doing so, you carve a pathway from the darkest corridors of your past toward a future illuminated by purpose. yours and everyone's touched by your hard-won light. Processing past trauma is not a task that can be completed in a day or even a season of life. It is a deep psychological excavation that demands honesty, structure, courage, and responsibility. You begin by confronting what you've been avoiding, choosing to look directly into the parts of your history that make your stomach tighten and your heart race. That voluntary confrontation marks the first shift, from being held hostage by your memories to becoming the one who observes them with intention. You may tremble, you may cry, you may even feel worse before you feel better. But in that act of turning toward the darkness, you have already done something most people never dare to do. You have chosen to heal with your eyes open. Once you've faced the storm, the next step is to order the internal and external chaos it has left behind. That means introducing discipline and stability into areas of your life where trauma introduced disorder. Routines may seem mechanical at first, but they are the scaffolding that allows the broken psyche to rebuild. A tidy room, a regular sleep schedule, a written record of your thoughts. These aren't minor details. They are bricks in the foundation of your recovery. And in time, they become the map that keeps you oriented, the rhythm that replaces confusion with clarity. You begin to move from surviving to living, and that movement, though slow and often imperfect, is sacred. But the journey does not stop at structure. It deepens through the power of expression. Language becomes your tool for liberation. When you speak or write about your trauma truthfully, you reclaim authorship over your life story. No longer are you just a character trapped in a terrible chapter. You are the narrator, the one who gives meaning and shape to what once felt meaningless and chaotic. This act of articulation helps your brain integrate the past, draw boundaries between then and now, and remind your soul that you are no longer in that place. Through speaking, you are not only releasing the poison but creating the antidote. Finally, true transformation happens when you decide that your suffering must serve a purpose beyond itself. When you take responsibility, not for what happened to you, but for how you carry it forward, you access a power that trauma alone cannot offer. You evolve from someone wounded to someone wise. You start seeing your past not as a limitation, but as a source of strength, and that strength ripples outward to your relationships, your work, your community. You become a light in someone else's dark tunnel. In choosing to process your trauma rather than be consumed by it, you are not just healing, you are leading, you are rising, and above all, you are becoming more than what broke you. Thank you for taking the time to watch this powerful and deeply personal message. If this speech resonated with you, know that you are not alone, and healing is not only possible, it is within your reach. Every step you take toward understanding your past is a step toward reclaiming your future. The journey through trauma is difficult, but it's one of the most courageous paths a person can walk. I hope this message gave you clarity, strength, and a sense of direction. If it helped you, please consider sharing it with someone else who might need to hear these words today. You never know whose life you might change just by spreading hope and insight. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected for more thought-provoking content that empowers, uplifts, and challenges you to grow. Until next time, take care of your mind, honor your journey, and never stop becoming the strongest version of yourself. Thank you, and goodbye for now.